Maybe Kathy wants to say that.
I knew it was. I suggested it. Oh, thank you.
Don't worry, we haven't started yet, but we're hoping we might get one or two more. Feel free to stay.
Let's lock the doors and keep everything in here.
Okay. They already offered me a mix for downstairs as well. I just said, sorry, I'm going upstairs.
Shabbat Shalom, everybody. It's nice to see everyone seems to be in good spirits. And we've got crates away in Israel at the moment, but we're very fortunate to have the Sanderson number 1 to start off with in service. So, enjoy. Shabbat Shalom.
Shabbat Shalom, everyone. This morning's service is Shabbat morning service number 2 on page 112. Please stand. Eternal God, a mystery surrounds my life. What came before it and what lies beyond it, are shrouded in darkness. But in the darkness is your presence, and in the mystery, your love. No mind can grasp the splendour of your being, no tongue express the majesty of your works. Yet there are times when we sense a reality that is beyond our mortal sight. May this Sabbath be such a time for us. Help us to hear your voice, to find your image in our souls, and to be at peace. Elohai, neshama shenatata bi tahora hi, ata barata, ata yatsata, ata nefakta bi, va'ata meshamra bekirbi, kol zaman shahan shema bekirbi, modeh ani lefanecha, Adonai Elohai Elohei Avotai, Ribon kol hama'asim, Adon kol hamshamot, Baruch atah Adonai, Asher be'adon nefesh kol chai, Beruach kol basar ish. Baruch she'amar b'haya ha'olam, Baruch hu. Baruch atah Adonai, Eloheinu melech ha'olam, Hamkulal b'fi amo, Meshuba umfo'al bilshon chasidav va'avadav, Bishvachot ubizmirot, Negadel habenam licha ma'akenu, Yachid chei ha'olamim, Baruch atah Adonai, Melech Kulal Batishvachot. To you the stars of morning sing, from you their radiance bright did spring, and steadfast in their vigils, day and night, your angels, flooded with fervour, ring your praise. They teach the holy ones to bring into your house the breath of early light. The heavens declare the glory of God.
The sky proclaims God's handiwork.
Day unto day utters speech.
Night unto night teaches knowledge.
Yet there is no speech. There are no words.
Not a sound of them is heard.
And still their call goes out to all the earth.
And their message to the end of the world.
God's teaching is perfect.
Reviving the soul.
God's word is unfailing.
Making wise the simple.
God's precepts are right.
Delighting the mind.
God's commandments are clear.
Enlightening the eyes.
God's doctrine is pure.
Enduring forever.
God's guidance is true.
And altogether just.
They are more to be desired than gold, than any amount of fine gold.
Sweeter than honey from the honeycomb.
Your servant pays heed to them.
For on keeping them much depends.
Who is aware of errors?
Cleansing therefore unconscious sins.
Hold back your servant also from willful sins.
And not control.
Then I shall be blameless.
Innocent and brave.
May the words of my mouth and the meditation of my heart be acceptable to you, O God, my rock and my redeemer. Bashamayim uva'aretz. Ki lecha na'eh Adonai Eloheinu ve'Elohei Avotenu shir ushvacha halel v'zimra barachot v'hoda'ot me'ata v'ad olam baruch atah Adonai haboher b'shirei zimra. Please now turn to page 135. Baruchu et Adonai Hamvorach.
Baruch Adonai Hamvorach.
Please be seated. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech יוצר אור ובורא חושך, עושה שלום ובורא את הכל, המאיר לארץ ולדרים עליך ברחמים, ובטובו מחדש בכל יום תמיד מעשה בראשית. מה רבו מעשיך, אדוני, כולם בחוכמה עשית, מלא הארץ קנייניך. תתברך אדוני אלוהינו, על שבח מעשה ידיך ועל מאורי אור שעשית, יפארוך סלע. Baruch atah Adonai, Yotzer Hamorot. Great is your love for us, eternal God, and abundant your compassion. Our ancestors trusted in you, and you taught them the laws of life. So be gracious to us and teach us. Incline our hearts to hear your words, to know and understand, to learn and teach, and with love to uphold the truths of your Torah. Enlighten us with your teaching. Make us faithful to your commandments, and wholehearted in the love and awe of your name. For in love you summon us to serve you, and proclaim your unity. We praise you, O God. In love you have called your people Israel to serve you. Please stand. Shema Yisrael, Adonai Eloheinu, Adonai Echad. Hear, O Israel, the Eternal One is our God. The eternal God is one.
Shema Yisrael, Adonai Eloheinu, Adonai Echad.
Baruch Shem Kavod Malchuto Le'olam Va'ed.
Baruch Shem Kavod Malchuto
אשר אלפים סופך היום על לבביך, ושיננתם לבביך בדברת בם, בשבתך בביתך, ובלכתך בדרך, ובשבתך ובקומך, וקשרתם לאות עליך, והיו לטוטפות בין עיניך, וכתבתם על מזוזות ביתך, ובישעריך. Please be seated. Sound, established and enduring are these words, now and forever. True it is, Eternal One, that you are our sovereign God and Redeemer, as you were the God and Redeemer of our ancestors. You are our Maker, the rock of our salvation. We have known you always as our helper and our liberator. There is no God but you. Truly you are first and you are last. We have no Redeemer but you. You redeemed us from Egypt and freed us from the house of bondage. Then, with great joy, Moses, Miriam, and all Israel together sang to you this song. Baruch atah Adonai, Eloheinu v'Elohei Avotenu v'Eloheinu, Elohei Avraham v'Elohei Yitzchak v'Elohei Yaakov, Elohei Sarah, Elohei Rivka, Elohei Rachel v'Elohei Leah, Ha'el HaGadol HaGibor v'Hanora, El Elyon, Omer Chasadim Tovim, v'Konei HaKol, v'Zoreh Chasdei Avot v'Imahot, v'Mevih Geulah Livnei Bneihem, למען שמו באהבה, מלך עוזר ומשיח ומגן, ברוך אתה אדוני, מגן אברהם ועזרת שרה. אתה גיבור לעולם אדוני, מחיה מתים אתה רב ומשיח, משיב ברוח ומוריד הגשם, מזריח השמש ומוריד הטל, מחלקל חיים בחסד, מחיה מתים רחמים רבים, צומח נופלים ורופא חולים, ומתיר אסורים, ומקיים אמונתו לשפי עפר. מי כמוך בעל גבורות, ומי דומה לך, מלך ממיט ומחיה ומצמיח ישועה, ונאמן אתה לחיות מתים, ברוך אתה אדוני, מחיה המתים. We sanctify your name on earth, as in the prophet's vision, the hosts of heaven sing your praise above, for so it is written,
Kadosh, 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 Adonai Tzebaot, Melech haaretz kvodo.
Kavodo malei olam. From your concealment, majestic one, reveal yourself and rule over us, for you are our hope.
Yimloch Adonai leolam, Elohai Zion, לדור ודור, Hallelujah.
לדור ודור נגיד גדלך, ולנצח נצחים קדושתך נקדיש, ושבחך אלוהינו, מפינו לא ימוש לעולם ועד. ברוך אתה אדוני, האל הקדוש. Please be seated. You inspired our ancestors to hallow this day for your service. When upon its coming we pause to contemplate our life, we learn anew that we do not live by bread alone, but also by the spiritual nourishment we receive when we open ourselves to your influence. We thank you for the Sabbath day and for the opportunity it offers to enhance the quality of our lives. We thank you for its joy and for its peace. May our worship help us to take into our hearts its message of holiness and consecrate all our days by devotion to what is true, beautiful, and good. Sabenu mituvecha, v'samchenu b'shuatecha, ותהה ליבנו לעובדך באמת. והנחילנו אדוני אלוהינו, באהבה וברצון, שבת קודשך, וימנוהו בך ישראל, מקדשי שמך. Baruch atah Adonai, Mekadesh Hashem. Eternal God, be gracious to your people Israel, and in your love accept their prayers. May our worship now and always be acceptable in your sight. We praise you, O God, whom alone we worship in reverence. Modim anachnu lach, she'ata hu Adonai Eloheinu, Elohei Avotenu, le'olam va'ed. Tzur chayenu, magen yishenu, ata hu l'dor v'dor. Nodeh lecha v'nisapeh tilatecha, al chayenu ha'mesurim bi'adecha, va'al nishmotenu ha'pekudoth lach, va'al nisecha she'b'chol yom imanu, va'al niflotecha v'tovotecha, she'b'chol eit erev v'boker v'tzoharayim. Baruch atah Adonai, hatov shimcha, v'lecha na'el lehodot. Grant peace, welfare and blessing, grace, love and mercy to us and to all Israel your people. As a loving parent, bless us with the light of your presence, for by the light of your presence, eternal God, you have revealed to us the law of life, a love of kindness and righteousness, blessing and mercy, life and peace. For it is good in your sight that your people Israel and all peoples be blessed at all times with your gift of peace. We praise you, O God, the source of peace.
Continue with Kriyat HaTorah, the reading of the Torah, on page 481. There is none like you, Eternal One, among the gods people worship, and there are no deeds like yours. Your sovereignty is everlasting, your reign endures from age to age. Eternal One, you reign, you have reigned, you will reign forever. Eternal God, give strength to your people. Eternal God, bless your people with peace.
Adonai,
Shema Yisrael, Adonai Eloheinu, Adonai Echad. Hear, O Israel, the Eternal One is our God. The Eternal God is one. Let us magnify the Eternal One. Together, let us exalt God's name.
This week's Torah portion is by Yetze from the book of Genesis. It's about halfway through the book of Genesis. I'll be reading chapter 28, verses 10 to 22. It can be found on, depends on which version of the JPSA Tanakh you have, but one of them is page 43 and the other it's page 56. So it depends whether it's the one that goes forwards to backwards or backwards to forwards, page 43 or 56. And in the Sonshino Chumash, it's on page 164. Baruchu et Adonai Hamvorach.
Baruch Adonai Borach L'olam Va'ed.
Baruch Adonai Hamvorach L'olam Va'ed. Baruch Ata Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, asher b'habanu mikol ha'amim, v'natan lanu et Torato. Baruch Ata Adonai Notei HaTorah. Amen. Vayetze Yaakov miBeer Sheva, vayelech Harana, vayifga b'makom v'yalem sham, ki v'hashemesh vayikach me'avnei hamakom, vayasem l'roshotav, vayishkav b'makom hahu, v'yahalom v'hinei sulam mutzav arza v'rosho, magia hashamayma, v'hinei malachei Elohim olim v'yordim bo. V'hinei Adonai nitzav alav, v'yomar ani Adonai Elahei Avraham aviha, v'Elahei Yitzchak, ha'aretz asher ata shochev alecha, lecha, etnena ulezarecha, v'haya zarha ka'afa ha'aretz, uvratz hayama v'kedma, v'tzafona v'negba, v'nivrachu v'cha, Kol mishpachot ha'adama uvezarecha, v'hinei anachi imach, ushmarticha b'chol asher teleh v'hashivoticha el ha'adama hazot, ki lo ha'ezavcha ad asher im asiti et asher dibarti la. Vayikatz Yaakov mishnato, vayomer achen yesh Adonai b'makom hazeh, va'anochi lo yadati v'yira vayomar manora hamakom hazeh ein zeh ki im beit Elohim v'zeh she'ah hashamayim. Vayeshkeim Yaakov baboker, vayikach et ha'even asher sam mera'ashotav, Vayasem ata metzeva, vayitzak shemen al rosha, vayikra et shem hamakom hahu beit el, v'ulam luz shem ha'e l'rishona. Vayada Yaakov nedel lemor, em yihye Elohim imadi ushmarani baderech hazeh asher anochi holech, v'natan li lechem le'echol uveged lilbosh. V'shavti b'shalom
el beit avi v'haya Adonai li le'Elohim laha'even hazot asher samti matzeva yihye beit Elohim v'hol asher titein li aser ha'asreinu lach.
Jacob left Beersheba and set out for Haran. He came upon a certain place and stopped there for the night, for the sun had set. Taking one of the stones of that place, he put it under his head and lay down in that place. He had a dream. A stairway was set on the ground, and its top reached to the sky, and angels of God were going up and down on it. And the Lord was standing beside him, and he said, I am the Lord, the God of your father Abraham, and the God of Isaac. The ground on which you are lying I will assign to you and to your offspring. Your descendants shall be as the dust of the earth. You shall spread out to the west and to the east, to the north and to the south. All the families of the earth shall bless themselves by you and your descendants. Remember, I am with you. I will protect you wherever you go, and will bring you back to this land. I will not leave you until I have done what I have promised you. Jacob awoke from his sleep and said, Surely the Lord is present in this place, and I did not know it. Shaken, he said, How awesome is this place! This is none other than the abode of God, and that is the gateway to heaven. Early in the morning, Jacob took the stone that he had put under his head and set it up as a pillar, and poured oil on the top of it. He named that site Bethel, but previously the name of the city had been Luz. Jacob then made a vow, saying, If God remains with me, if he protects me on this journey that I am making, and gives me bread to eat and clothing to wear, and if I return safe to my father's house, the Lord shall be my God, and this stone, which I have set up as a pillar, shall be God's abode. And of all that you give me, I will set aside a tithe for you. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech ha'olam, asher natan lanu Torat emet, v'hayei olam nata b'tochenu. Baruch atah Adonai notein haTorah.
The Haftarah today is from 1 Kings, or Kings 1, chapter 20, verses 1 to 13. It can be found in the JPS Tanakh, page 763 of the 1990 edition that I have here, from which I'm reading, and on page 557 of the other edition, which is the blue color. The events of today's Haftarah reading take place during the existence of the two kingdoms. The northern kingdom had as capital Samaria, founded by Omri, the father of King Ahab of our portion. Of general interest, Ahab was married to Jezebel, the Jezebel, who followed the cult of Baal. It was Prophet Elias' view that the king indulged her on that. Probably he did. The consequences of this are described elsewhere in the book of Kings. However, more to the point of our reading today, excavations have shown the luxurious life of the court in Samaria. In particular, fairly recently, evidence of an ivory house built by Ahab. No wonder that other powers in the region coveted Samaria, as we are going to see. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, asher b'ha'avim v'yim tovim, v'ratzav v'divreihem ha'ne'emerin be'emet. Baruch atah Adonai, habocher b'Torah, Moshe avdo, u'v'Yisrael amo, u'v'nvi'im ha'emet v'tzedek. King Ben-Hadad of Aram gathered his whole army. 32 kings accompanied him with horses and chariots. He advanced against Samaria, laid siege to it, and attacked it. And he sent messengers to Ahab inside the city to say to him, Thus said Ben-Hadad, your silver and gold are mine, and your beautiful wives and children are mine. The king of Israel replied, As you say, my lord king, I and all have are yours. Then the messengers came again and said, Thus said Ben-Hadad, Then I sent you the order to give me your silver and gold and your wives and children. I met that tomorrow at this time I'll send my servants to you, and they'll search your house and the houses of your courtiers, and they seize everything you prize and take it away. Then the king of Israel summoned all the elders of the land, and he said, See for yourselves how that man is bent on evil. For when he demanded my wives and my children, my silver and my gold, I did not refuse him. All the elders and all the people said, Do not obey and do not submit. So he said to Ben-Hadad's messengers, Tell my lord the king, all that you first demanded of your servant I shall do, but this I cannot do. The messengers went and reported this to him. Thereupon Ben-Hadad sent him this message, May the gods do this to me, and even more. If the dust of Samaria will provide even a handful for each of the men who follow me. The king of Israel replied, Tell him, let not him who girds on his sword boast like him who ungirds it. On hearing this reply, while he and the other kings were drinking together at Sukkot, he commanded his followers, Advance! And they advanced against the city. Then a certain prophet went up to King Ahab of Israel and said, Thus said the Lord, Do you see that great host? I will deliver it to your hands today, and you shall know that I am the Lord. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, zu kol haolamim tzadik v'chol hadorot, ahel hanam mayam, hayomer v'osei, hamdaber umchayim, shekol b'debarav emet v'tzedek. Al HaTorah v'al Avodah v'al Havin v'Nvin v'al Yom HaShabbat Hazeh שנתת לנו אדוני אלוהינו לקדושה ולתנועה לכבוד ולתפארת על הכל אדוני אלוהינו אנחנו מודים לך ומברכים אותך. יתברך שמך בפי כל חי עמיד לעולם ועד. ברוך אתה אדוני מקדש השבת.
Eternal God, whose dominion embraces the universe, we ask your blessing for our Sovereign Lady Queen Elizabeth and all the royal family, for those who govern our country and all who influence the quality of its national life. Make them conscious of their responsibility and teach them to exercise it in accordance with your will. May we all help to fashion in this country a society that excels in freedom and justice, tolerance and compassion, so that it may be a force for righteousness and peace in the life of humanity. Eternal God, as you blessed our ancestors in generations past, bless now this congregation, its leaders, its members, and all who enter this synagogue to meet, to study, and to pray. Comfort the sorrowing hearts among us and heal those in anxiety or pain. May we all find here community and friendship, renewal of purpose and hope, a deeper understanding of our heritage, and a sense of your abiding presence. Bless all congregations of the house of Israel throughout the world. Let those who live under oppressive rule soon be freed, and may we all unite to witness to your truth and do your will. Amen. Eternal God, our rock and redeemer, grant blessing to the state of Israel, created to fulfill an age-old dream and to be a haven for the oppressed. Inspire its leaders and citizens with faithfulness to the aims of its founders, to develop the land for the benefit of all its inhabitants, and to implement the prophetic ideals of liberty and justice. May they live in harmony with one another and in peace with their neighbours, and cause to come true once more the ancient vision that out of Zion shall go forth Torah and the word of God from Jerusalem.
Amen.
Yehalelu et Shem Adonai ki niskav shemo levado. Let us praise the Eternal One, whose name alone is exalted. God's word is unfailing. God's precepts are right. God's commandments are clear. God's doctrine is pure. God's guidance is true. Behold, a good doctrine has been given you. Do not forsake it. It is a tree of life to those who hold it fast, and all who cling to it find happiness. Its ways are ways of pleasantness, and all its paths are peace. Dude, this is television. The good guys always win. So stated Beast Boy, one of the superheroes of the US series Teen Titans. In every instance, good shall triumph over evil, and the criminal shall be punished for his misdeeds. So stated the Comics Code, an authority formed in 1954 to allow comic publishers to self-regulate the content of comic books in the United States. And on that note, we remember the death this week actually of Stan Lee. If a story has a hero who fights a villain, then the hero will win in the end. There might be stumbles along the way. It may take a hero's journey or two to result in a happy ending. Evil might score a few victories first and maybe even almost win in the darkest hour, reference the 2017 Churchill movie starring Gary Oldman, before good saves the day. In the end, there's usually never any doubt in the audience's mind that the forces of good will prevail. As comic readers, as film viewers, as video game players, we've become trained and accustomed to read about or witness the good guys winning. And such a hope or expectation is not limited to the worlds of fiction and fantasy. The belief that good will prevail in the world satisfies our desires and expectations, and indeed has been reflected in much of our history. Here in the United Kingdom, this is seen as a mainstream and appropriate way to view ourselves. Since the triumph of Elizabeth I over the Spanish Armada in 1588, the list of military and economic triumphs this country has achieved, subject to one or two setbacks along the way, have been extensive. The British Empire, the Industrial Revolution, victory in 2 world wars, our economic transformation over the past 70 years are just 4 examples of how virtue and success have walked forward hand in hand. Worldwide, this has also been the case. For example, we've seen the defeat of both fascism and Nazism in 1945 and of communism in 1989. Since 1945, global conflict has not been repeated. We've been the beneficiaries of a technological revolution, which have improved our economic well-being, and this defeat of evil by good has been encapsulated in recent times by the growth of the form of government known as liberal democracy. So much was this position understood to be the case that by the end of the 20th century, Francis Fukuyama, an American political scientist and economist, in a 1989 essay entitled The End of History, put it this way: what we may be witnessing is not just the end of the Cold War or the passing of a particular period of post-war history, but the end of history as such. That is, the end point of mankind's ideological evolution and the universalisation of Western liberal democracy as the final form of human government. But let's now fast forward to 30 years later, i.e. now. Here we are, and we have to ask ourselves if what Fukuyama stated remains correct. Where did the good guys, the good times, and good government go? This week's Sidra of Vayetze is the second of 3 Sidrot which feature the story of the 3rd patriarch, Jacob. Last week, in the Sidra of Toledot, we read about Jacob's birth and his life with his parents, Isaac and Rebekah, and his twin brother Esau in Canaan. In this week's Sidra of Vayetze, we learn, after the dream that Danielle read about, we learn about Jacob's residence with his uncle Laban in Syria. And next week, we shall read about his family life back in Canaan, when after wrestling with his conscience and/or God in another dream, he apparently reconciles with his estranged brother Esau. Jacob is also included in subsequent parashot, but the focus on these moved to his son, Joseph. One overriding characteristic of Jacob's life is that it is highlighted by deceit and trickery. The name Jacob means grabber or supplanter, and it aptly describes his character. Early on, he cons Esau out of his birthright as the firstborn son. At Rebekah's suggestion, he later deceives his dying father, Isaac, and steals Esau's blessing as well. Jacob is then forced to flee for his life to his mother's brother's home. There, as we read in this week's Sidra, Jacob gets a dose of his own deceitful medicine from Laban when Laban gives him Leah rather than Jacob's choice of Rachel, Leah's younger sister, as a wife. Later, Jacob does marry Rachel, but he has to work for 20 years for Laban. But Jacob then returns to his old flawed ways. He takes much of Laban's wealth away by first breeding a certain type of flock and then running away with this livestock, with Laban's 2 daughters and with his 11 children, whilst in Syria Jacob had produced 11 children through 2 wives and 2 concubines. It has to be said that for most of these 3 Sidrot, Jacob comes across as a pretty unpleasant liar and manipulator, a bad guy. Yet it is he who receives God's blessing, and he who is renamed Israel, meaning wrestling or clinging to God, as the 3rd patriarch. Rabbinic and other commentators have made many excuses for Jacob's behaviour and have tried to justify his serious flaws by asserting that in later life he becomes a reformed character converted by God along the way. However, looking at the Torah text itself, this appears to be a retrospective justification of what is for the main part Jacob's deceitful and immoral behaviour throughout most of his life. Jacob is in reality a bad guy who wins. In the last 2 sermons I have given here, I've talked about the rise around the world of the forces of populism, nationalism and anti-Semitism that have taken place over the last 10 years since the economic recession of the early 2000s. In this country, this has culminated in the Brexit vote of 2016 and the election of a hard-left Labour Party leader in September 2015. The Brexit vote was a populist uprising against what was perceived as the control exercised by unelected leaders of the EU, a distrust of established elites, a response to a sense of deprivation and being left behind, and a desire to take back control and reduce levels of immigration. Jeremy Corbyn's leadership election win was a reaction to the perceived elitism of New Labour under Tony Blair and Gordon Brown. Corbyn was elected on an anti-austerity platform combined with a desire to implement what were presented as more radical yet straightforward political and economic solutions. As of today, both these forces remain in place. We are heading for what I believe will be a painful withdrawal from the EU at the end of March next year. Despite it becoming increasingly apparent that the economic and political implications of Brexit are likely to be damaging, the degree of damage being impacted by whether or not we sign a withdrawal agreement with the EU, and we've seen all the fun and games this week about that, we continue to head towards a cliff edge over which we will jump on the 29th of March 2019. And despite a series of high-profile complaints and protests about the existence of anti-Semitism in the Labour Party, investigations and consequent changes appear superficial. At the recent Labour Party conference, reverence towards Jeremy Corbyn was matched by the waving of Palestinian flags. Meanwhile, whilst a criminal investigation is launched into violent anti-Semitic threats made against the Labour MP Lucien Berger, neither Jeremy Corbyn nor any member of his senior team has offered support of any kind, despite party officials being fully aware of these threats for at least 6 months. There is little sign of change within the Labour Party, and a reasonable possibility, should Labour win the next general election, that this institutional anti-Semitism may become part of our government's approach. And across the world, the situation is similar. In the US, we've seen the rise of Donald Trump and extreme republicanism. The recent midterm elections there represented a minor setback, as the Democrats gained a controlling majority over the House of Representatives. More concerning was the language used through the campaign by President Trump. Trump revved up the anti-immigrant language, attacked the media, and reinforced divisiveness, showing negative partisanship towards the Democrats, whilst repeating his mantras of America first and make America great again. In this way, he reached out to his base and strengthened his position in the Senate, having already achieved a majority of judges in the Supreme Court with the controversial appointment of Brett Kavanaugh. Now President Trump will begin his campaign to be re-elected in 2020, and he could well be successful, particularly in the absence of a worthy opponent with a clear vision and strategy. Is this another bad guy set to win again? And elsewhere things look little better. In Europe, there are extremist governments in Hungary, Austria and Italy. And at the end of October, after 13 years at the top, the authority of Angela Merkel as Chancellor of Germany began to melt away. Frau Merkel was heavily defeated in regional elections in Hesse, and her party, the CDU, together with its coalition partner, the Social Democratic Party, were blown away by the Greens and the right-wing AfD, Alternative für Deutschland party. Mutti, as she is known, has now agreed to step down as party leader and will in due course step down as Chancellor. It is unclear who will succeed her and how things will turn out at the next election due in 2021. A venom-spewing far-right leader and former army captain, Jair Bolsonaro, has also recently been elected in Brazil. In Turkey, we now have the effective dictatorship of Recep Erdogan, who has arrested hundreds of journalists and sacked thousands of officials and academics over the past 2 years. And in Russia, we have Putin, who invades countries and authorises the poisoning of overseas citizens with little remorse. I could go on, but that's enough to illustrate where we stand. Across the world and in our country, it would appear that it is the bad guys who are winning, and there are few signs that things will change soon. In 2014, on the occasion of the 25th anniversary of the publication of his original essay, Francis Fukuyama wrote a column in the Wall Street Journal updating his hypothesis. He wrote that whilst liberal democracies still had no real competition from more authoritarian systems of government in the realm of ideas, nevertheless he was less idealistic than he had been during the heady days of 1989. Fukuyama noted that the Orange Revolution in Ukraine and the Arab Spring, both of which had failed in their pro-democracy goals, as well as the backsliding of democracy in countries like Turkey. He stated that the biggest problem for democratically elected governments in some countries was not ideological, but their failure to provide the substance of what people want from government: personal security, shared economic growth and basic public services that are needed to achieve individual opportunity. Fukuyama also warned of political decay, which he wrote could also affect established democracies like the United States, in which corruption and crony capitalism erode liberty and economic opportunity. Nevertheless, he expressed his continued belief that the power of the democratic ideal remains immense. However, 2 years later, following Britain's decision to leave the EU and the election of Donald Trump as President of the United States, Fukuyama feared for the future of liberal democracy in the face of resurgent populism and the rise of a post-fact world, saying that 25 years ago, I didn't have a sense or a theory about how democracies can go backward, and I think they clearly can. Jacob is a man willing to justify anything to get whatever he wants, and in doing so he is triumphant. Jacob cons his brother twice and humiliates his father. He is estranged from his brother for decades and takes much of his uncle Laban's wealth away. The so-called reconciliation of Jacob and Esau, about which we read next week, is in fact only superficial and temporary. Jacob and Esau never meet again until after their father dies, and then only to bury him. Despite all this, Jacob becomes a man of wealth, God's chosen patriarch, and the descendants of his sons become the 12 tribes of Israel. The bad guy of Genesis has won. Perhaps the lesson for us all here is that those words of Beast Boy and the Comics Code, that the good guys always win, is not always the case. For a period of time, possibly quite long periods of time, bad does triumph over good, and we, to some extent, have to suck that up and endure it. Perhaps this is one reason why we are presented in the Torah with the tainted character of Jacob and his dysfunctional family. We have to accept that the bad guys of the world or of a tribe do sometimes win. This is perhaps a societal adjunct to Harold Kushner's reflections on individual suffering in his well-known book Why Do Bad Things Happen to Good People? Perhaps there should be a sequel called Why Do Good Nations Get Bad Leaders and Policies? So what to do? Most important of all, we must never give up hope. Here in this country and around the world, we need to support wherever possible the forces of tolerance and the application by the media and experts in their field of objective facts. We need to support moderate and pragmatic ideas and leaders in the hope and expectation that they will eventually regain power and influence. There's nothing wrong with being patriotic, but this must be linked to the notions of generosity and openness to strangers. President Macron of France put it this way when he spoke to world leaders who included Presidents Trump, Putin and Erdogan on Remembrance Sunday. Patriotism is the exact opposite of nationalism. Nationalism is a betrayal of patriotism. In saying our interests first, whatever happens to the others, you erase the most precious thing a nation can have, its moral values. In 2 weeks' time, we will begin to read about Joseph, and then a few weeks later, we begin the book of Exodus and follow the story of Moses. Joseph and Moses are both great and worthy leaders. Joseph endures great hardship after being dumped by his brothers and imprisoned by Pharaoh, and becomes a great leader, creating wealth for his country, whilst being generous to his father and brothers despite the way they had treated him when they left him for dead in the desert. And Moses becomes our greatest prophet, liberating his people and leading them to the promised land, whilst imbued with the admirable characteristics of perseverance and humility. Neither of them are perfect by any means, but they are both good guys. For us here today, they serve as a symbol of hope that we should direct towards a future era, perhaps a future generation. As Rabbi Frank said in his sermon last week, our generation has been a very privileged and fortunate one. No global conflict for over 70 years and a comfortable lifestyle for most of us. But perhaps now for a while, these good times may be over and we will have to endure more discomfort as a result of the tribal forces which embody a more devious, populist, nationalist, and for us anti-Semitic culture. It may be that the bad guys are going to be on top for a while. Mahatma Gandhi, the leader of India's non-violent independence movement against the United Kingdom's rule of the country during the 20th century, stated the following: "When I despair, I remember that all through history, the way of truth and love have always won. There have been tyrants and murderers, and for a time they can seem invincible. But in the end, they always fall. Think of it always." As we struggle through what may be a tougher and more challenging time than those to which we have become accustomed, let's remember Gandhi's words. The bad guys may prevail for a while, but like Gandhi, let us never give up hope, and let us strive for a more peaceful, democratic and tolerant world, so that ultimately the Comics Code is right and good does indeed triumph over evil. Amen.
Amen.
Let's turn to page 607 before moving on to the Aleinu. Prayer on behalf of the sick person. Eternal God, we thank you for the gift of life and for the healing powers that you have implanted within your creatures. Sustain, we pray, our loved ones through this time of illness. Is there anyone who would like to mention somebody who is not well?
Lee Chapman, Hannah Keller, Rafe Brown.
Anyone else like to mention anyone? Okay. I just think of Mike, Solomon, and of course my sister Mandy. Grant them courage and strength to endure pain and weakness. Teach us how best to help them by our love and care for them, and by our own composure. May they and all who are ill know that you are with them, comforting them and reinforcing their will to get well. May their afflictions soon be ended, and may they return in health to family and friends. May it be your will, Eternal One, our God and God of our ancestors, speedily to grant a perfect healing of body and mind to them and all who are sick. Baruch atah Adonai, Rofei HaCholim. Now let's stand for the Aleinu on page 520. Aleinu l'shabeach la'adon hakol, la'teit gdula l'yotzei b'reshit, asher sam chalkeinu yachei et shalom, v'kor aleinu la'amlich malchuto. ומושב יקרו בשמיים ממעל ושכינתו בגופי מורמים. הוא אלוהינו אין עוד, אמת מלכנו אפס ולטו, הכתוב בתורתו וידעת היום, והשבתה אל לבביך, כי אדוני הוא האלוהים, בשמיים ממעל, ועל הארץ מתחת אין עוד. Trusting in you, eternal God, we hope soon to behold the glory of your might, when false gods will vanish from our hearts and idolatry cease forever. Help us to perfect the world by bringing it under your unchallenged rule, when all will invoke your name, relinquish evil and turn to you alone. May all who dwell on earth come to know that to you every knee must bend and every tongue swear loyalty. Before you let them humble themselves, and to your glorious name let them give honor. Let all submit to your sovereign rule. May that time come soon and last forever. but ultimate sovereignty is yours, and to all eternity will reign in glory, as it is written, the Eternal One shall reign forever. Life is finite. Like a candle, it burns, it glows, it is radiant with warmth and beauty. Then it fades, its substance is consumed, and it is no more. And this Shabbat we recall for blessed memorial the names of Alec Carr, father of Terence Carr, Betty Carr, mother of Terence Carr, Sidney Clark, father of Helena Stone, Ben Green, husband of Frankie Green, and Maria, we remember your mother-in-law, Lily Landau. We remember Malcolm Marcus, husband of Kathleen Marcus, and we remember Millie Tapper, mother of Evelyn Bruce. Yet we do not despair, for we know that we are more than a flickering flame. With our lives we give life. Something of us can never die. We move in the eternal cycle of darkness and light, of death and life. And is there anyone else that anyone would like to remember this Shabbat? As in our hearts we name our loved ones, we pray that the divine presence will comfort us and all we mourn. Yitgadal Yitgadash Shemei Rabah, Yomad Yirach Yirtei Yamlich Malchutei, B'chai Echon Yom Echon, B'chai Kol Beit Yisrael, B'chalav Zman Kariv Yivru Amen. Yehei Shemei Rabah Morach Rabah Rabah Yitbarach Yishabach Yitmahal Yitromam Yitmaseh, Yitada Yitalei Yitalal Shemei Kedusha V'Yichur, Le'ehavim Kol B'chata V'Shirata, Tishachata B'nechata, Tatanam Yamav Yiru Amen. Yehei Shloah Rabah Mishamai, B'chayim Aleinu Yal Kol Yisrael, Yiru Amen. Oseh Shalom B'Romah, Lu Yaseh Shalom, Aleinu Yal Kol Yisrael, Yal Kol B'nei Adam, Yiru Amen. Please be seated. And we conclude with Adon Olam.
Yes. Adon Olam Hashem Olam, B'Tzelem Kol Yitzim Yivlah, Ve'et Nasa B'Chetz Okol, Azar Melech Shemlo Yikra, Ve'yacharech Yilot HaKol Ve'rach Ado Yilot Aram Ve'hu Hayah Ve'hu Lo Haveh, Ve'hu Yiyeh V'Tifara, Ve'hu Echad Ve'en Sheni, Ve'ham Shelo Echad Mirah, En Yireh Shim Ben Yitzadvid, Ve'lo Havas Ve'hamizrah, Ve'hu Eli Ve'chaimani Ve'tzorcheni Ve'etzara, Ve'hu Tesi Yomar Osi, Ve'kat Osi Ve'yom Echad, Ve'yado Afiluchi, Ve'etisham Ve'ayira, Ve'yibruchi Ve'biyati, Adonai li ve'lo ira, Ve'yado Afiluchi Ve'etisham Ve'ayira, Ve'yibruchi Ve'biyati, Adonai li ve'lo ira, lo ira.
Please stand. Ve'yado Akid Ruchi, V'etishan va'ira. V'imruchi gaviati. Adonai le v'lo ira. Into our hands we commend our spirits, when we are asleep and when we are awake. For you are near, and with my soul, my body also, you are my God, I shall not fear. Amen. Shabbat shalom.
Shabbat shalom. Before we go downstairs, we have got a bit of time. I think there's still kind of a bit where we conclude part of the service. And I'll give you great pleasure to thank both Danielle and Stephen for a wonderful service, sort of fullness as always, and also Stephen for such a thought-provoking sermon from different angles. It's given us a lot to think about, make us conscious about what's going on really. So thank you both, and also thank you to Lobo and Joseph for a wonderful musical accompaniment. It really did help enhance the spirituality of the service. Shabbat shalom. I say don't rush because I think they're a little bit behind schedule. I think Stephen should have had a longer sermon.
Only bits of it.
Yeah, go through it with the words and everything. Yes. Make sure I understand each word that it takes. It takes time.
So, you know, when I think it's so much no, and I'm sure you have to, because I think I might actually find that easier.
Yeah, that's the thing. I recommend it because it gets much way to write for you.
Yes. I would love to learn how to do it.
They should do it. I mean,
Yeah.
I can teach it, but I don't have time to do it right now. But they ought to do a class here. I mean, it's a good skill.
Thank you very much. Yes, I'm still trying to work out
Congratulations, society.
But yes, like the verses, it's easy to understand.
I mean, I can read that. I don't like
It's not like lots of things, but it is
she writes well. She can read dates. Yes. What it is, yeah. I'm curious in a way to read because I've read, of course, the one about Scottish judgments is very so I watched it. So I've read that and I feel like it. And then I'd like to know more about the meaning. That's the matter. There was something else about it. Again, it's a shock.
Because if you learn the chanting, it actually gives you the pause.
Well, that's right. That's probably why I remember. Anyway, I did something, I read something else, and I thought that was anyway, there you are.
Yeah, it's alright. It's been a bit, not terrible, but
You can see all the and it's still
we'll get through it. Yeah,
it's just annoyed me.
I should have written off too much. More, but I didn't. that's good that we've everyone knows that.
No, I didn't.
So you did part of the sermon, or you did
I did a very short part of the sermon.
Right.
She did the sermon.
Okay.
Could you copy me in on this? I'll show you how to get it from me.
You must read Sapiens, because that's what the bit is that we do.